Her expression oscillated between mortification and disbelief. Her eyes met Robert's across the room, and in that moment something passed between them. Not attraction, not yet, but recognition. The universal recognition of two overprotective parents being exposed by their own children. "At least I'm not the only crazy one," Maria murmured, rising from her chair with all the dignity she could muster. Robert did the same, adjusting his jacket in an automatic gesture of nervousness. As they walked toward the central table, where their children were still laughing uncontrollably, neither could imagine that this embarrassing moment was just the beginning of something that would completely transform their lives. The silence that followed the teenagers' laughter was as thick as the air conditioning in the Ritz. Robert stopped a meter from the central table, hands in his dress pants pockets, trying to decide which facial expression to adopt. Too stern would seem authoritarian, too casual would seem careless. Maria approached from the other side, her arms crossed defensively over her chest, her face still flushed. "So," Sarah said, wiping a tear from laughing so hard, "did you two really think you could hide out here?" "The restaurant is big," Maria weakly defended herself. "I was just making sure everything was okay." "3 tables away," Ethan added, looking at his father with a smile that mixed amusement and reproach. "Very subtle, Dad." Robert cleared his throat. "I had a business meeting here. Pure coincidence." "On a Tuesday night? At the exact time of my date?" Ethan raised an eyebrow, a gesture he had inherited from his father and was now using against him. A waiter approached, clearly uncomfortable with the unusual situation. "Gentlemen, is everything all right? Would you like me to—" "Everything is great," Robert interrupted in the voice he used for business advice. Firm, controlled, making it clear that the matter was closed. The waiter immediately stepped back. Maria observed the interaction closely. She recognized the type instantly. She had dealt with clients like that in her studio, men accustomed to commanding environments, having every word obeyed without question. They were usually the worst clients, the ones who changed their minds at every meeting and expected her to redo entire projects at no extra cost. "Look," Sarah interjected, her voice taking on that mature tone that always surprised Maria. "Since you two are here and obviously not leaving, why not sit with us? At least we can stop pretending this isn't completely bizarre." Ethan looked at Sarah with something close to admiration. "Good idea." "It's not a good idea," Maria and Robert said simultaneously, then looked at each other, equally surprised by the synchronicity. "Why not?" Sarah insisted. "Seriously, what difference does it make? You've already ruined any chance of this being a normal date." The waiter returned with 2 additional chairs, moving with the silent efficiency of someone who had witnessed many strange family situations in this establishment. There was no turning back. Robert sat down first, adjusting the napkin on his lap with surgical precision. Maria hesitated before sitting, realizing that the upholstered chair probably cost more than her entire dining table. "Maria Thompson," she said, extending her hand across the table, deciding it was better to establish some normalcy. "Interior designer." Robert shook her hand briefly. Her palm was rough, he noted, not unpleasantly but noticeably. "Working hands." "Robert Anderson, investments." "What kind of investments?" Maria asked, genuinely curious. "The boring kind," Ethan replied before his father could. "Funds, stocks, companies that do things no one understands." "Diversified portfolio management," Robert corrected, but there was a hint of humor in his voice. "My son thinks anything without explosions is boring." "Your mum thinks interior design is boring too," Sarah added, looking at Maria. "She says I should be an engineer because it pays better." "I never said that," Maria protested. "I said you have a talent for math and should consider all options." "It's the same thing." The waiter brought sparkling water in crystal glasses, lemon slices floating in perfect rounds. Robert automatically picked up the wine menu, then noticed Maria's look. Not disapproving, but evaluative, calculating. He put the menu down. "Maybe just water for now," he said. "Wise choice," Maria agreed, and there was something in the way she said it that made Robert feel he had passed some unspoken test. "So, Ms. Thompson," Ethan began, evidently deciding to take control of the situation. "The agency said Sarah is in a private school on a full scholarship. That's impressive." Maria felt pride swell in her chest. "Yes, she scored 98% on the entrance exam, perfect in math and English." "Mom, stop," Sarah murmured, but she was smiling. "It really is impressive," Robert agreed, and his voice carried genuine sincerity. "Ethan is also excellent in math. It's always come naturally to him." "Until I had to present in front of the class," Ethan said, and something in the room shifted. His voice became quieter, more tense. "That's when I discovered that math doesn't matter when you can't breathe properly." Sarah looked at him with immediate understanding. "Anxiety." Ethan nodded, studying the fork in front of him as if it were the most fascinating thing in the world. "I have panic attacks," Sarah shared calmly. "It started when my dad left. For an entire year, I couldn't sleep without a light on." Maria felt her throat tighten. They never talked about this openly, especially not with strangers, but maybe it was precisely because they were strangers that Sarah felt safe to speak. "It's hard," Ethan said simply, meeting her eyes. "People don't understand. They think it's just being dramatic." "Or weakness," Sarah added. "It's neither," Maria said firmly, her protective mother voice emerging. "It's brain chemistry. It's real, and it's manageable." "Exactly what I say," Robert agreed, and when his eyes met Maria's this time, there was something different there, mutual respect, recognition that they were both navigating similar waters, trying to protect children that the world, Maria didn't fully understand. The waiter returned for the order. Robert, by habit, began to order for the group. 2 carpaccios to start, and for the main course, but stopped when he realized what he was doing. "Sorry, force of habit. What would you all like?" Maria grabbed the menu, saw the prices, and felt her stomach churn. The cheapest dish cost $180. She had $200 in her wallet for the entire week. "Actually," she began, choosing her words carefully, "Sarah and I already had dinner before coming out, maybe just an appetizer to share." Sarah looked at her, confused. They definitely hadn't had dinner. They had eaten bread with butter at 6 in the evening because Maria was saving to pay off her credit card bill due on Friday. Robert noticed. He hadn't gotten to where he was by being inattentive to details. He saw the tension in Maria's shoulders, the way her fingers gripped the edge of the menu, the quick and calculating glance she had given to the prices. "How about this?" he said casually, as if the idea had just occurred to him. "Since I'm here and had planned to have dinner anyway, why don't I put this on my tab? After all, I interrupted our kids' meeting. It's the least I can do." Maria's face hardened instantly. "That's not necessary." "I insist, and I'm refusing." The air between them became charged. Ethan and Sarah exchanged uncomfortable glances. "Miss Thompson," Robert began, realizing too late that he had stepped on a landmine. "Maria," she corrected, her voice icy, "and I appreciate the offer, Mr. Anderson, but I am perfectly capable of paying for my meal and my daughter's." "That's not what I meant. That's exactly what you meant." Maria stood up, grabbing her bag. "Sarah, let's go." "Mom, wait." "Sarah, now." Ethan looked at his father with an expression that clearly said, "Fix this." Robert stood up as well, partially blocking Maria's path, not physically, but with his presence. "I apologize," he said, and there was sincerity in his voice. "You're right. It was presumptuous of me. I didn't mean to offend." Maria paused, assessing him. She saw a man used to solving problems with money, but she also saw, perhaps, someone genuinely trying to do the right thing and failing miserably. "I accept your apology," she finally said, "but understand one thing. Mr. Anderson, I work hard for every dollar I earn. I don't need charity. I didn't come here looking for a savior. I came here because my daughter asked me to, and I would do anything for her. That includes sitting in this absurdly expensive restaurant and eating a $180 salad if necessary." Robert nodded slowly. "I understand, and I respect that." "Great." Maria sat down again, picked up the menu, and told the waiter with a firmness that dared anyone to question her. "Mushroom risotto for me, and the steak with fries for my daughter, and a bottle of still water." She would pay, somehow. Maybe she would use her credit card and reschedule other bills. Maybe she would skip lunch for the next few days. But she would pay, with her head held high. Robert watched her with something he hadn't felt in a long time, genuine curiosity. This woman was different from anyone he had met in the last 20 years, and that intrigued him deeply. The dinner proceeded in a delicate balance between moments of genuine conversation and loaded silences. Maria cut the risotto methodically, each bite calculated to last as long as possible, while watching Sarah and Ethan talk about shows, music, and the absurdities of school life. Robert remained quieter, but Maria noticed that he was paying attention to everything. To the boy's posture, the facial expressions, the moments when Ethan seemed uncomfortable and quickly composed himself. "Is your dad always like this?" Sarah asked Ethan at one point, discreetly pointing to Robert with her eyes. "Like what?" Ethan replied, genuinely confused. "Intense, like he's analyzing everything all the time." Ethan let out a short laugh. "You should see him in work meetings. He can make grown executives cry, with just a look." "That's an exaggeration," Robert interjected, but there was a slight smile on his lips. "No, it's not," Ethan insisted. "Remember that compliance guy who tried to hide the numbers from the last quarter? You looked at him for like 5 seconds, and the guy just crumbled and confessed everything?" "He was lying. Liars always give themselves away when confronted properly," Robert said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Maria watched the interaction with interest. "And what did you do with him?" "Fired him," Robert replied emotionlessly. "I can train incompetence. I can't train dishonesty." "Brutal," Sarah commented. "Necessary," Robert corrected. "When you manage billions of dollars for other people, there's no room for tolerance of fraud." "Billions?" Maria repeated before she could contain herself. The word came out with more astonishment than she intended. Robert noticed the tone, but didn't comment. "The company manages diversified portfolios, pension funds, institutional investors, family fortunes. It's a responsibility I take very seriously." "It must be," Maria said, returning to her risotto. "Billions." The man sitting across from her moved billions, while she struggled to pay $1,500 in rent every month. The difference was so absurd it bordered on surreal. When dessert arrived, a molten chocolate cake that Ethan and Sarah decided to share, the conversation shifted to lighter topics. Sarah talked about a science fair project, Ethan about a new game he was programming in his spare time, and Maria shared a story about a client who wanted to turn a 400-square-foot apartment into something Versailles-like. "Versailles-like," Robert repeated, intrigued. "His exact words," Maria confirmed, rolling her eyes. "He wanted crystal chandeliers, gold wallpaper, Louis XV-style furniture, all of that in a studio in the Upper East Side." "And did you do it?" Ethan asked, fascinated. "I made an adapted version. I used mirrors strategically to create, with amplitude, a palette of neutral colors with golden touches. I convinced him to invest in 2 statement pieces instead of cluttering the space. It looked elegant without resembling a jewelry store that had been robbed." Robert smiled. a genuine smile that completely transformed his face. That requires considerable political skill. It's 80% psychology, 20% design, Maria admitted. Most clients don't know what they want. They know what they saw on Pinterest and think it works for any space. "Do you have a portfolio?" Robert asked, and there was real interest in his voice. Maria hesitated. Her portfolio mainly consisted of photos taken with her phone of small projects, rented apartments, modest office spaces, nothing that would impress someone from his world. "I do, but they are residential projects, nothing corporate or large-scale. Still, I'd like to see it. I've always admired people who can visualize possibilities where others see only limitations." There was something in the way he said that, without condescension, without the tone of superiority she would expect, that made Maria slightly reconsider her initial assessment of him. The bill arrived in a small black leather folder. The waiter placed it right in the middle of the table, diplomatically neutral. Maria reached for it automatically, but Robert was quicker. "Please," he said calmly, "let me take care of this." "Mr. Anderson." "Robert," he corrected. "And it's not charity. It's a proposal." Maria narrowed her eyes. "What kind of proposal?" "Let me pay for dinner tonight," he started, raising his hand when he saw she was about to protest. "In exchange, you grant me a professional consultation. I'm renovating the office, 30 floors on Fifth Avenue, old concept needs. A complete update. I'd like your opinion." "A consultation costs much less than this dinner," Maria replied suspiciously. "Then consider it an advance." Ethan and Sarah watched the negotiation as if they were at a tennis match, heads turning from side to side. Maria weighed the offer. There was a part of her, the pragmatic part that paid bills and made spreadsheets at 3 a.m, that screamed to accept. A consultation for an office on Fifth Avenue could open doors. It could be the connection her studio needed to finally take off. But there was another part, smaller but insistent, that questioned his motives. "Why are you doing this?" she asked directly. Robert considered the question seriously. "Honestly? Because it's been a while since I've met someone who challenges me. You could have accepted my initial offer, let me pay for everything, said thank you, and left. Most people would do that, but you didn't. You have principles and stand by them, even when it's inconvenient. That's rare, and I respect rarity." It was a good answer. Perhaps too good. But Maria saw sincerity in his eyes, those brown eyes that his son had inherited, intelligent and frighteningly perceptive. "All right," she finally agreed. "But I'm going to do serious work, no superficial opinion just to justify dinner. I will assess the space properly, make real proposals, present budgets, and if I feel I don't have the expertise for the project, I'll be honest. I wouldn't expect less." Robert took out the credit card, black, unlimited, the kind Maria only saw in magazines, and placed it inside the folder. The waiter took it as if he were carrying something sacred. "Mum," Sarah said softly, leaning closer to her, "he seems nice." "Sarah." "Not for you," Sarah hurried to clarify, though her eyes had a mischievous sparkle. "I'm just saying, he seems like a good dad. Ethan is lucky." Maria looked at Robert's son, who at that moment was showing something on his phone to Sarah, both laughing at some inside joke they had already developed. Ethan seemed different from when he arrived, more relaxed, more himself, and she noticed that Sarah also seemed lighter, more open. As they left the restaurant, the New York night welcomed them with its characteristic noise. Cars passing by on the Upper East Side, the smell of warm asphalt from the day, groups of people walking along the illuminated sidewalks of designer stores. Robert's driver waited on the corner in a black Mercedes with tinted windows. "Can I give you a ride?" Robert offered, gesturing to the car. Maria looked at the street, where she would have to take an Uber. The trip to Greenwich Village would cost about $25 during peak hours. No, thank you. We'll take an Uber. I insist. It's on the way. You don't even know where I live. Greenwich Village you mentioned earlier, Robert reminded her with that annoyingly precise memory. And I live near Central Park. It's literally on the way. Sarah looked at her mother with that expression of, "Please, don't be proud now." Maria sighed. "All right, but only because it's late." The interior of the Mercedes smelled of new leather and expensive air conditioning. Ethan and Sarah sat in the back seats, continuing the conversation they had started in the restaurant. Maria sat in the front, next to the driver, a deliberate choice that did not go unnoticed by Robert, who sat behind with the teenagers. As they crossed the city, Robert watched Maria through the rearview mirror. She was looking out the window, watching New York pass by, the mansions of the Upper East Side gradually giving way to the older buildings of Greenwich Village, the streets narrowing, the movement shifting from imported cars to bicycles and skateboards. It was like crossing invisible borders between two completely different worlds. "Here," Maria indicated when they arrived at her street. "The third house after the bakery." The driver stopped in front of a 3-story building, 70s style, faded paint, but windows with flower pots that someone cared for. There was no doorman. The entrance door had a simple intercom. "Thank you for the ride," Maria said, already with her hand on the doorknob. "Maria," Robert called before she left. She turned. "My assistant will contact you tomorrow to schedule the visit to the office. Whenever works for you." "Afternoons work better. I have meetings with clients in the mornings." "Perfect." Sarah waved goodbye to Ethan with a "text me," which brought a genuine smile to his face. Mother and daughter got out of the car and entered the building, Maria briefly waving before the door closed. "She's interesting," Ethan commented as the car started moving again. "Interesting," Robert repeated, curious about what exactly his son was thinking. "Different. Sarah is too. They are real, you know? They don't pretend to be something else." Robert nodded slowly, looking out the window as they headed back toward the more upscale neighborhoods. "Yes, I noticed." And for the first time in many years, Robert Anderson went home thinking about someone who had absolutely nothing to do with finance, stocks, or return on investment. He thought of a woman with calloused hands who preferred to pay an outrageous bill rather than accept help. And that intrigued him more than any business had in decades. Maria's studio took up the entire living room of the apartment, transforming what should have been a communal space into an organized chaos of creativity. Clipboards leaned against the white-painted wall, covered with fabric samples pinned like a colorful mosaic. The dining table, a solid wood piece she had bought at a thrift store and restored herself, was perpetually covered with blueprints, supplier catalogs, paint samples, and her Italian coffee maker that had seen better days. It was 7 in the morning on a Thursday when the phone rang. Maria was in the small kitchen, brewing coffee and trying to convince Sarah to eat something other than cookies for breakfast. "Thompson Studio," she answered, balancing the phone between her shoulder and ear while pouring coffee into the cup. "Good morning, Miss Thompson. My name is Augustus Smith, executive assistant to Mr. Robert Anderson." The voice was formal, polite, with perfect diction. "Mr. Anderson requested that I schedule a visit to the Anderson Investments office to discuss the renovation project." Maria nearly dropped the cup. She half expected Robert's offer to have been mere social courtesy, something said in the heat of the moment and forgotten the next day. "Oh yes, of course," she replied, trying to sound professional. "What day would be convenient?" "Mr. Anderson is available this afternoon at 3 o'clock, if that works for you. Today, he wanted to do this today." Maria looked at her schedule. She had a meeting with a client at 10 to discuss the decor of a dental office and needed to stop by the supply depot to pick up wallpaper samples. She could fit it in. 3 o'clock works, she confirmed. Perfect. The office is located at 1234 Fifth Avenue, 31st floor. You will need to present ID at the reception. Any dietary restrictions? Mr. Anderson would like to offer coffee. Dietary restrictions, as if she were regularly asked about that. No, none. Excellent. We look forward to seeing you at 3 o'clock, Miss Thompson. When she hung up, Sarah was watching her from the kitchen door, school uniform already on, backpack slung over her shoulder. Was it him? She asked with that tone teenagers use when they want to seem uninterested but are dying of curiosity. It was his assistant. I'm going to the office today to see the project. Project? Sure, just a project, Sarah said with a mischievous smile. Sarah Thompson, you're 14. Don't start. I'm just saying he couldn't stop looking at you at the restaurant. He was being polite. Mom, I'm 14. I'm not blind. And Ethan said his dad never acts like that. Maria turned quickly. Like what? Interested. Attentive. Ethan said his dad usually stays on his phone the whole time, answering emails, making calls, but on Tuesday he put the phone away and didn't touch it once during dinner. Maria hadn't noticed that. Or maybe she had noticed and decided not to think about it. Well, that just shows he has good manners, she replied, returning to the coffee. Now go, or you'll miss the bus. Sarah left, still smiling. That smile, clearly saying she knew something her mother wasn't admitting. The headquarters of Anderson Investments occupied 3 entire floors of one of the most modern buildings on Fifth Avenue. Maria arrived 15 minutes early, a habit she developed after losing 2 important clients due to the chaotic traffic in New York. She wore her only pair of black dress pants, a white cotton blouse, and low-heeled shoes that didn't hurt after hours on her feet. She carried a synthetic leather portfolio containing a tablet, notebook, digital tape measure, and a professional camera she had bought used 6 months ago. The reception, on the 31st floor, was a statement of discreet wealth, Italian marble flooring, mahogany walls, a receptionist behind a counter that looked like it was carved from a single stone. The armchairs in the waiting area probably cost more than the car Maria sold last year. Miss Thompson, the receptionist asked with a professional smile, Mr. Anderson is waiting for you. Please follow me. They crossed a hallway lined with glass-walled meeting rooms, all empty at that hour. Maria observed everything with a technical eye, the cold corporate lighting, the repetitive layout, the complete lack of personality. The place felt more like a hospital than an office where people spent 8 or more hours a day. Robert's office was in the corner, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of New York. He was on the phone when she entered, gesturing for her to sit, but he quickly ended the call. "Maria," he said, standing up and walking around the large walnut table. He wore a dark grey suit, no tie, the sleeves of his shirt rolled up to the elbows, a slightly less formal version of the man she had met at the restaurant. "Thank you for coming so quickly. Your assistant was very persuasive. Augustus is efficient. Coffee, water? Water is great." He poured from a glass pitcher over the... Maria noticed the lemon slices in each glass, the same lemon from the restaurant. It seemed to be his preference. "So," Maria began, taking the tablet out of her bag and assuming her professional posture, "before we see the space, I need to understand the scope. You mentioned 30 floors. Are you talking about a complete renovation or just aesthetic adjustments?" Robert sat in the armchair next to her, not behind the desk, another detail Maria noted. "The building was constructed in 1998. We've made small updates over the years, but nothing structural. The company has grown, the way we work has changed, but the space has remained essentially the same." "And what specifically do you think doesn't work?" "Everything," Robert replied without hesitation. "The rooms are isolated, closed off. No one interacts unless absolutely necessary. Employees eat at their desks, work late because there's no reason to stay in a space That feels like a corporate prison. Turnover has increased 40% in the last 2 years. Maria took notes quickly. Did you research why? We conducted exit interviews. The responses varied, but one common theme, work environment. Oppressive was the most used word. And what do you want the space to convey? Robert paused, considering. No one had asked him that before. The 3 architects he had consulted previously began by presenting portfolios, talking about trends, showing photos of Google and Facebook offices. But Maria asked questions first. I want people to want to be here, he finally said. Not out of obligation, but because the environment facilitates work, encourages collaboration, respects that we are human beings, not productivity machines. That's very different from what you have. Now, Maria observed, looking around his office, functional, sleek, but as cold as a freezer. I know. Can I ask what motivated this change? Robert stood up, walking to the window, hands in pockets. From there, New York stretched to the horizon, grey, dense, relentless. Ethan tried to take his life 8 months ago. The silence that followed was absolute. Maria felt her heart tighten. He couldn't get into school. The anxiety was so severe that he had a panic attack in the parking lot. When I arrived, the school called me. I found him in the bathroom. He had swallowed half a bottle of anxiolytics. Robert didn't turn, continuing to look out the window. The doctors said he was lucky. 15 more minutes and it would have been too late. Robert, I'm so sorry, Maria said, and the words felt terribly inadequate. I spent 15 years building a financial empire, he continued, his voice controlled but heavy with emotion. 15 years focused on numbers, returns, expansion. And in that time, I barely knew my own son. I didn't know he was suffering. I didn't know that every day was torture for him. I was so obsessed with building financial security that I forgot to build emotional security. He finally turned, and Maria saw something in his eyes that she hadn't expected. Raw, honest vulnerability. So yes, I want to change the office. Because if I built an environment that left me so disconnected from the most important thing in my life, I probably built an environment that disconnects everyone here from their own lives too. Maria nodded slowly, processing. This wasn't just a renovation, it was penance, redemption through architecture. All right, she said, standing up and grabbing her camera. Then let's start from the beginning. Show me the space, everything, and introduce me to some people who work here. I need to understand not just what you want, but what they need. Robert watched her for a moment. This woman in simple clothes and modest equipment, proposing something that none of the expensive architects had suggested, listening to the people. Aren't you going to show me a portfolio first? He asked, genuinely curious. For what? You're not hiring my portfolio. You're hiring my ability to solve a problem. The portfolio only matters if you don't trust that I can do that. She looked him directly in the eye. Do you trust? It was a bold question, direct, exactly the kind of question Robert asked in important negotiations. He smiled, small but genuine. Yes, I trust. Great, now show me this oppressive office. They spent the next 3 hours touring each floor. Maria photographed everything, measured spaces, asked questions about workflow, hours, corporate culture. She talked to assistants, analysts, managers, asked about natural light, temperature, noise, privacy. She meticulously noted everything. Robert watched her work, fascinated. She had a way of making people feel heard, leaning in slightly when someone spoke, maintaining eye contact, asking follow-up questions that showed genuine attention. His employees, usually reserved and formal, opened up to her in minutes. When they finally returned to his office, it was past 7. The sun was setting over New York, painting the sky orange and pink. "How much time do you need to develop a proposal?" Robert asked. 2 weeks, maybe 3. It's a lot of work." "How much do you charge?" Maria hesitated. This was always the hardest part. "For a project of this size, I would normally charge 10% of the total project cost, but since we don't have a budget yet, charge a flat fee for the proposal. If we approve the project, we adjust to a percentage. 15,000 for the complete proposal, including floor plans, 3D renderings, technical specifications, preliminary budget." It was a high amount for her. She usually charged 5, at most 8,000. But this was an exponentially larger project. Robert didn't blink. 20,000. "I want 3 options, not 1. "Robert, 20,000, Maria, and a 50% deposit now." He was already pulling out the checkbook. Who still used a checkbook? And filling it out. "Consider the rest. Contingency for costs that may arise." He extended the check. $10,000. Maria looked at him, then at the check, then back at him. "Isn't this charity?" she asked, echoing the conversation from the restaurant. "It's fair payment for qualified work. You spent 3 hours here, you'll probably spend 100 hours in the next few weeks. After weeks developing the proposal, your time is money, and I pay well for quality." Maria took the check, folding it carefully and placing it in her bag. $10,000. She could pay 3 months' rent in advance. She could finally replace the laptop that crashed all the time. She could buy decent school supplies for Sarah. "Thank you," she said simply. "Thank you for accepting the project." As she left, while waiting for the elevator, Maria looked back and saw Robert still at the window, watching the city. There was something lonely about that figure. A powerful man in an empty office, surrounded by everything and connected to nothing. And for the first time, Maria wondered what exactly he was building there. An architectural project, or something much more complicated? The following weeks turned into a whirlwind of work that Maria hadn't experienced in years. She woke up at 5 in the morning, brewed coffee strong enough to wake the dead, and dove into the floor plans of Anderson Investments before the sun even rose. The dining table completely disappeared under layers of tracing paper, material samples, supplier catalogues, and 3 borrowed laptops from colleagues because her own couldn't handle the 3D rendering programs. Sarah learned to navigate the chaos, making her own morning coffee and simple dinners when her mother was so absorbed that she forgot to eat. One Wednesday night, she found Maria asleep over the drafting, embored, a pencil still in hand, her hair tied in a messy bun that hadn't seen a comb in 2 days. "Mom," Sarah called softly, touching her shoulder, "you need to sleep for real, in a bed." Maria lifted her head, disoriented, a red mark on her face where she had rested against the T-square. "What time is it?" 1 in the morning. Again. "I just need to finish this lighting design." "You need to sleep," Sarah insisted with that firmness she had inherited from her mother. "The project won't disappear in 6 hours." Maria rubbed her eyes, realizing her daughter was right. In the last 15 days, she had averaged 4 hours of sleep per night. But she couldn't stop, not with a project this size, not when she finally had the chance to prove she was capable of something beyond small apartments and medical offices. The phone vibrated on the table. A message from Robert. "Still awake?" Maria looked at the screen, surprised. He was still awake at 1 in the morning? "Working," she replied. "And you?" "Same here. Asian markets open in 2 hours. You never sleep." "Sleeping is for people without impossible deadlines," came the reply, followed by a coffee emoji that made her smile despite the fatigue. In recent days, they had developed this habit. Short messages, usually late at night, mostly about work, but sometimes drifting into random topics. He had sent a picture of Ethan getting a perfect score on a physics test. She had sent a picture of a particularly ridiculous floor plan a client had asked to include in the project. "It looks like a giant spider," he had commented. "That's exactly what I told the client," she had replied. "Sarah is telling me to go to sleep," Maria typed. "Sarah is wiser than both of us. True, good night, Robert. Good night, Maria, and try to sleep for real. I want you rested for the presentation." The presentation in 3 days. Maria felt her stomach churn with nerves mixed with excitement. On the morning of the presentation, Maria woke up at 5 and immediately vomited from anxiety. Sarah knocked on the bathroom door, worried. "Mom, are you okay?" "I am," Maria replied, washing her face with cold water and looking at herself in the mirror. Deep dark circles, pale skin, but there was a sparkle in her eyes that she hadn't seen in a long time. Determination. Just nerves. She dressed carefully. The same black outfit she had worn on the first visit, but this time added a colorful scarf around her neck, bringing a touch of color and personality. Sarah helped her tie her hair in an elegant bun, neater than the hurried buns of the past weeks. "You're going to crush it," Sarah said, hugging her around the waist. "I saw the project, Mum. It's amazing." "I hope he thinks the same." "He will, and if he doesn't, he's an idiot." Maria laughed, squeezing her daughter against her. "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been. You were just too busy to notice." The conference room at Anderson Investments on the 31st floor was intimidating. An oval table for 20 people, state-of-the-art projection system, leather chairs that probably cost the monthly salary of a teacher. Maria arrived an hour early, enough time to set up her presentation, test the equipment 3 times, and take a deep breath at least 10 times. Robert entered promptly at 3 o'clock, accompanied by 5 people he introduced quickly. August, the executive assistant, Helena, HR director, 2 senior partners of the firm, and to Maria's surprise, Ethan. "Ethan wanted to watch," Robert explained upon noticing her expression. "If it's not a bother." "Of course not," Maria replied, smiling at the boy, who waved shyly before sitting next to his father. She took a deep breath, turned on the projector, and began. "I spent the last 3 weeks studying not only the physical space of Anderson Investments, but also its culture, workflow, and people. I spoke with 42 employees at different hierarchical levels, and I identified 3 main issues. The first image showed the current layout. Rows of closed offices, narrow hallways, lack of common areas. Problem 1, isolation. Each department operates in its own bubble. Communication between sectors is formal, scheduled, done by email. There's no space for organic collaboration, for those casual conversations that often generate the best ideas. Robert leaned forward, completely focused. Problem 2, spatial hierarchy. The current layout constantly reinforces who has power and who doesn't. Large offices for executives, cramped cubicles for analysts, offices with a view for directors, windowless stations for assistants. This creates resentment and disconnection. Helena, the HR director, nodded vigorously. Problem 3, dehumanization. There is practically no element that recognizes that the people here are human beings with needs beyond productivity. Without adequate natural light, without decompression spaces, without areas that allow for genuine privacy when necessary. Maria paused, letting the information settle, then moved on to the next series of images, her proposals. I developed 3 different concepts, as requested. The first I call gradual integration, substantial changes that preserve part of the current structure. The second, radical transformation, complete demolition of internal walls and total reconstruction of the layout. And the third, adaptive hybrid, an intermediate solution that balances openness with the need for privacy. She started with The hybrid concept, presenting 3D renderings that showed the transformed office, glass walls replacing drywall, adjustable lighting that mimicked the color temperature of natural light throughout the day, modular workstations that could be reconfigured as needed, common areas strategically positioned, a library with comfortable armchairs, a spacious kitchenette inviting people to take real breaks, small silence rooms for those needing temporary isolation. The central idea, Maria explained, walking around the table, using her hands to gesture as she spoke, is to create an environment that respects different needs. Some people work better in open, collaborative spaces. Others need silence and concentration. The modern office needs to accommodate both, not force everyone to adapt to a single model. She showed specific details: acoustic panels strategically installed to absorb noise, live plants integrated into the architecture to improve air quality and bring nature indoors. Even a small gym on the top floor for employees who wanted to exercise during their lunch break. The proposed materials are mostly sustainable, she continued, showing physical samples she had brought. Certified wood, VOC-free paints, low-energy LED lighting systems, not just because it's good for the planet, but because people respond better to environments that don't slowly poison them. With synthetic chemicals, Ethan looked fascinated at the images, his eyes scanning every detail. Robert remained still, but his expression had changed, from businesslike and neutral to something deeper, more personal. Maria presented the technical floor plans, the detailed budgets for each concept. The hybrid would cost approximately $8 million, the radical transformation $12 million, and the gradual integration $5 million. She explained timelines, construction phases, strategies to minimize work disruption. And finally, she said, reaching the last slide, an important observation. None of these physical changes will work if the company culture doesn't change along with it. You can build the most beautiful and functional office in the world, but if people are still treated as disposable resources, if success is measured only in hours worked, if vulnerability is seen as weakness, none of this will matter. The silence in the room was absolute. Maria felt cold sweat trickle down her back. Perhaps she had gone too far. Perhaps she shouldn't have made that final comment about corporate culture. She was an architect, not an organizational consultant. Robert was the first to move. He slowly stood up, walked to the projector and looked at the images still on the screen. That transformed office, full of light and life and possibility. "How long?" he asked, his voice controlled but laden with emotion. "Pardon?" "How long to implement the hybrid concept?" Maria consulted her notes. "With the right team and quick approval from suppliers, 8 months, maybe 10. Robert nodded, then turned to the partners. "Thoughts?" "It's radical," one of them said, but it didn't sound like criticism. "But necessary. Helen has been warning us for years about organizational climate issues. Maybe it's time we really listened." "The cost is significant," the other partner observed. $8 million is not a small amount." "We are losing talent to competitors," Helen interjected. "Turnover is costing much more than $8 million in recruitment, training, and lost productivity. This is an investment, not an expense." "Ethan?" Robert asked, surprising everyone. "You're the youngest audience member here. What do you think?" Ethan looked at his father, clearly not expecting to be consulted. "I think it's amazing, Dad. Especially the silence rooms. I would love to have a place like that when everything gets too intense." Robert smiled, that genuine smile that completely transformed his face. Then he turned to Maria. "When can we start?" The relief that flooded Maria was so intense that she had to hold onto the table. "We need project approvals, licenses, contracts with suppliers. Realistically, in 6 weeks. Make it 4. August will arrange whatever is necessary. Speed up the processes, whatever it takes." Robert extended his hand. Congratulations, Maria. You gave us something I didn't know I was looking for. Hope. Maria shook his hand, feeling the firmness of the grip, seeing something in his eyes that made her blush slightly. It's just architecture. No, it's much more than that. And you know it. They stayed in the conference room after the others left. Maria, starting to dismantle the presentation equipment. Ethan had asked to wait for his father in the car, leaving them alone. "Can I confess something?" Robert said, helping her coil the power cables. "Of course. I almost cancelled the presentation 3 times. Maria stopped, surprised. "Why?" "Because I was afraid of what you might reveal. About me, about the company, about the kind of environment I built." He paused, choosing his words. "You have a way of seeing truths that people spend fortunes trying to hide. You asked for honesty, I gave it, and I thank you for that, even when it hurts." Robert stepped closer, not invading personal space, but close enough for her to feel the warmth of his presence. "Maria, I would like, that is, if it's not inappropriate considering we now have a professional relationship, would you like to have dinner with me? No teenagers, no agendas, just the 2 of us." Maria's heart raced. She should say no. She should maintain clear professional boundaries. She should remember that he was a client, that mixing business with personal matters was a recipe. As the sun began to set, Maria heard herself say, "Yes, I would like that." His smile was like the sun rising, slow, warm, illuminating everything. "Saturday? I know a place in Greenwich Village, a small Italian restaurant, excellent food, nothing flashy." Saturday works. When Maria left the building, the sun was already setting over New York. She took out her phone and saw 17 messages from Sarah. And, "Mom, respond. If you don't respond, I'm going to faint. Did they approve?" Maria simply typed, "They approved. And there's more news. I'll tell you at home." The response was instant. "He asked you out, didn't he?" Maria laughed out loud right there on the sidewalk of Fifth Avenue, causing a few suited executives to look at her strangely. Her daughter knew her too well, and for the first time in 5 years, Maria Thompson allowed herself to feel something she had buried deep after the divorce. Hope that maybe, just maybe, she deserved something good to happen. If you or someone you know is going through a tough time, there is free support available. The restaurant Robert had chosen was tucked away on a narrow street in Greenwich Village, the kind of place only locals or insiders knew about. There was no flashy sign, just a discreet, green wooden door with a hand-painted number. Maria passed by it twice before realizing it was the one. She had changed outfits 4 times before leaving. The simple navy blue dress she finally chose was the same one she wore to a cousin's wedding 2 years ago. Sarah had supervised every step of the preparation like a demanding film director, insisting that her mother let her hair down. "You look so much prettier like this, Mom, seriously." Wear the only makeup they had. Just a little mascara. I promise you won't look like a different person. And take the crocheted shawl that her grandmother made. It might get chilly at night, and that shawl makes you look elegant. "You look like a teenager going on her first date," Sarah had commented, watching her mother check her reflection for the 5th time. "It's practically that," Maria admitted. "It's been 5 years since my last real date." "And how long since you were genuinely excited about someone?" The question made Maria stop and think. Much longer than that. Now, standing in front of the green door, Maria took a deep breath and entered. The interior was cozy in a way that money can't buy. Exposed brick walls painted white, only 8 tables covered with red and white checkered tablecloths, candles in repurposed wine bottles. It smelled of garlic, basil, and fresh bread. An elderly gentleman was softly playing the guitar in a corner. Old Italian songs that Maria didn't recognize, but created the perfect atmosphere. Robert was already there, at a table in the corner, but he wasn't wearing a suit. Dark jeans, a white button-up shirt with the sleeves rolled up, no watch. He looked 10 years younger, lighter, more human. "You found it," he said, standing up as she approached. "I thought it might be complicated." "I walked past it twice," Maria admitted with a smile. "Is the discretion part of the charm?" "Exactly. Victor, the owner, doesn't believe in advertising. He says that those who deserve to eat here will find out naturally." Robert pulled out the chair for her. "You look beautiful." Maria felt her face warm. "Thank you. You also look different, in a good way." "Without the corporate armor?" he joked, sitting down. "My therapist says I wear clothes as armor. Apparently I'm less intimidating in jeans." "You have a therapist?" "For 8 months, since Ethan. I figured if I was asking my son to go to therapy, the least I could do was start my own." A waiter brought over an already opened bottle of red wine and 2 glasses. "Complimenti della casa," he said, with a thick Italian accent. "For Robert's friends, always the best Chianti." After the waiter left, Maria looked at Robert curiously. "Friends of the house? I've been coming here for years. When I need to step out of the bubble of the Upper East Side, when I need to remember that New York has a soul beyond concrete and glass." He raised his glass. "A toast? To what?" "To new beginnings, new projects, new possibilities." Maria clinked her glass against his, the clear sound of crystal echoing softly. The wine was good. She didn't know much about wines, but she could tell this was of a higher quality than what she usually drank. "Can I ask a question?" she said after her first sip. "Of course." "Why me? No offense, but you could hire any famous architecture firm in New York. People with impressive portfolios, international awards, experience in much larger projects than yours. Why choose an independent architect working from home?" Robert swirled, the wine in his glass thoughtful. "Do you want the diplomatic answer or the honest one?" "Always honest." "Because all the other architects I consulted sold me versions of what they thought I wanted to hear. They showed me tech company offices with ping-pong tables and video games, as if manufactured fun could compensate for toxic culture. Or they showed me ultra-modern designs that looked more like museums than workplaces. No one asked me what I really needed. No one talked to my employees. No one had the courage to tell me to my face that the problem wasn't just the physical space, but who I am as a leader." He paused, meeting her eyes. "You weren't trying to impress me. You were trying to solve a real problem. And that, Maria, is rare, especially in my world, where everyone is always selling something." The food arrived. They hadn't even ordered, but apparently Victor had decided for them. Antipasto to start, then gnocchi with pesto that melted in the mouth, followed by ossobuco that fell apart with a fork. Each dish was a simple yet perfect work of art. "Oh my God," Maria murmured after her first bite of gnocchi. "This is obscenely good. Victor cooks like his grandmother taught him in Tuscany. No shortcuts, no rush, just real ingredients and time." They ate in comfortable semi-silence for a few minutes. That kind of silence that only exists between people who don't feel the need to fill every second with words. "Can I ask a question now?" Robert eventually said. "Fair enough. What happened to Sarah's father? You mentioned he left but didn't go into details." Maria set her fork down on the plate, her appetite waning a bit, but Robert deserved honesty if he was offering the same. "Richard, I met him in college. He was studying business. I was architecture. We married too young. I was 23. He was 25. Sarah was born 2 years later." She took a deep breath. "The first years were good. Not perfect, but good. He worked at a startup, always promising that when the company took off, everything would get better. I worked at an architecture firm, earning little but learning." "What changed?" "The startup failed. Richard didn't take it well. He started investing in get-rich-quick schemes, bitcoins when no one really understood them, multi-level marketing, day trading without proper knowledge. He used our savings. Worse, he took out loans in my name without telling me. Maria felt the familiar anger tighten in her chest. When I found out, we were already $120,000 in debt. I confronted him. We fought. He told me I was too negative, that I didn't believe in his potential, that if he had a more supportive wife, he wouldn't be in that situation. He blamed you for problems he created, Robert observed, and there was contained anger in his voice. Exactly. A week later I came home from work and he was gone. He took the car, the TV, the few pieces of jewelry I had, heirloom from my mother. He left a note saying he needed to start over and that I should keep Sarah because he wasn't in a position to be a father right now. Maria picked up her wine and took a long sip. That was 5 years ago. He never contacted again, doesn't pay child support, doesn't call on her birthday. He simply evaporated. And the debts? They remained in my name. I spent the last 5 years paying little by little. I still owe 40,000. She laughed humorlessly. The project from your firm will finally allow me to pay it all off. Ironic, isn't it? Years of hard work paying for someone else's mistake, and suddenly a project changes everything. Robert was quiet for a moment, processing. Does Sarah know everything? She knows her father left and didn't come back. She doesn't know the financial details. I never wanted her to carry that weight or think it was her fault in any way. She's lucky to have you. Sometimes I don't feel that way. Sometimes I feel she deserved so much more. A real house, not a rented apartment. Vacations, not weekends in the park. A mother who isn't always exhausted and stressed. Maria, Robert said firmly, taking her hand across the table. You raised an incredible girl on your own while building a career and paying debts that weren't yours. That's not failure. That's everyday heroism. Maria's eyes burned with tears that she blinked quickly to hold back. It doesn't feel that way most days. The best kinds of heroism rarely do. Victor brought the dessert, authentic tiramisu and 2 small, strong espressos. The conversation drifted to lighter topics. Books they loved, movies they hated, hidden gem places in New York they considered treasures. Maria discovered that Robert had a dry and unexpected sense of humor, that he liked old jazz and despised electronic music, that he had lived 6 months in New York and hated every minute. Why? She asked, intrigued. Too fast, too impersonal. People there measure your worth by what you do, not who you are. Here at least we have that Brazilian illusion that relationships matter even when they don't. Cynical. Realistic, he corrected with a smile. When they finally left the restaurant, it was already past midnight. Greenwich Village was alive with crowded bars, music spilling from open doors, couples walking hand in hand down the cobblestone streets. Robert offered to take her home, but Maria declined. I live 4 blocks from here. I can walk. Let me walk you then. They strolled slowly, in no hurry, as if they both wanted to prolong the night. The narrow streets of the village at night had a particular magic. Colorful graffiti on the walls, plants hanging from balconies, stray cats watching from atop walls. Ethan told me something interesting, Robert said when they were a block from her building. He and Sarah have been talking. A lot, every day, actually. Sarah mentioned, too. Apparently, Ethan is much smarter than the boys at her school, Maria said with a smile. He said Sarah is the first person his age who really understands him, that he can talk about anxiety without her treating him like he's broken. Sarah has been through so much since her father left. Panic attacks, insomnia, nightmares. The school suggested medication, but we preferred therapy first. It worked eventually, but it left her with deep empathy for anyone suffering from anxiety. They stopped. In front of her building, the streetlight cast soft shadows on Robert's face, highlighting the strong line of his jaw, the first grey hairs at his temples. "Thank you for dinner," Maria said. "It was really special. For me too." Robert hesitated, clearly wanting to say something more. "Maria, I know we have a professional relationship now, and I don't want to complicate that. But I need to be honest about something." "What?" "I can't stop thinking about you. Since that ridiculous dinner at the Ritz when our kids exposed us. You're smart, talented, resilient in ways I didn't even know were possible, and I would really like to explore what that could be. But only if you want to. No pressure, no expectations." Maria felt her heart race. The rational part of her screamed caution. He was a client, came from a completely different world. There were 1,000 reasons why this was a bad idea. But there was another part, the one that Sarah had awakened with her provocations. Maria took a risk. "I can't stop thinking about you either," she admitted softly. "And it scares me because it shouldn't. You're a client, you are. You are. You. Billionaire powerful, on the other side of a line I never imagined crossing. Forget the money for a second. Forget the company, the office, all of that. We're just two people who connected. Isn't it worth seeing where this could go?" Maria looked at him, really looked, beyond the expensive clothes and confident demeanor, at the man underneath. She saw someone lonely trying to be better. Someone who loved his son as fiercely as she loved her daughter. Someone who chose a hidden restaurant instead of an ostentatious place because he valued authenticity over impression. "It's worth it," she finally said. "But slowly, Robert. I have Sarah to think about, you have Ethan, and I can't afford to make mistakes." "Slowly," he agreed. "At your pace. Always." He leaned in and kissed her cheek softly, the kind of kiss that promised patience and possibility. Then he stepped back, hands in his pockets, smiling that smile she was beginning to recognize as genuine. "Good night, Maria." "Good night, Robert." She climbed the stairs. The elevator was broken again, feeling lighter than she had in years. When she entered the apartment, Sarah was awake, pretending to read on the couch, but obviously waiting. "So?" she asked as soon as her mother walked in. "It was good." "It was good." "Mum, you were gone for 6 hours. There has to be more details than that." Maria took off her shoes, let her hair down, and sat next to her daughter on the couch. "He's interesting, complicated, but interesting. You like him?" It wasn't a question. It was a statement. "I'm starting to," Maria admitted. "But it's scary, Sarah. He's so different from everything I know." "Different can complement each other," Sarah said, with that teenage wisdom that sometimes surprised her. "You always say that about design, that the best spaces mix contrasting elements." Maria laughed, hugging her daughter. "When did you become the wise one here?" "I've always been. You just take a while to notice." That night, Maria lay down, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't think about bills, doubts, or project deadlines. She thought about Robert, the way he listened, truly listened, as if every word mattered. And she allowed herself just for a moment to imagine that maybe this story could have a happy ending. The following months were a complex choreography of work, meetings, discreet dinners, and late-night messages. The renovation of the Anderson Investments office began on a grand scale, walls being demolished, plumbing exposed, the smell of fresh paint and cut wood permeating every floor. Maria was on site almost every day, safety helmet on her head, work boots on her feet, discussing details with contractors and checking if every element was being executed according to the plan. Robert frequently showed up, observing the progress, but mostly watching her. There was something mesmerizing about the way Maria commanded the space. Firm with the workers when necessary but respectful, listening to suggestions, adjusting plans when someone pointed out a practical problem she hadn't anticipated. She didn't just design spaces, she built them with her own hands when needed. "You don't need to be here every day," Robert commented one August afternoon, finding her on the 28th floor, checking the installation of the acoustic panels. "We hired a project manager for that." "I know," Maria replied, adjusting the measurement of a panel that was 2 centimeters off. "But it's my project, my reputation. If something goes wrong, it's my name that gets tarnished, not the project manager's." "Obsessive control or perfectionism?" he asked with a half-smile. "Both, and pride too," she admitted. "This is the biggest project I've ever taken on. I can't afford to make mistakes." Robert took the other side of the panel, helping her reposition it. They worked in silence for a few minutes, an easy and natural rhythm establishing between them. "Dinner tonight?" he asked when they finished. "I can't. Sarah has her science fair presentation. I promised I'd be there." "Can I come along?" Maria paused, surprised. "You want to go to a public school science fair?" "I want to be where you are," he said simply. "And Ethan mentioned he helped Sarah with her project. It would be nice to support them." Something tightened in Maria's chest, good and scary at the same time. This was becoming real. It was no longer just dinners in discreet restaurants or late-night messages. It was him wanting to step into her life for real, into the messy and everyday part. "Okay," she agreed. "But it's a public school in the East Side. There's no valet parking or efficient air conditioning." "Maria, do you realize you're constantly testing me?" Robert observed, but there was no accusation in his voice, just playful curiosity. "Am I?" "You are. Every time you mention something about your life, your reality, you expect me to back off, as if you're trying to scare me." Maria considered this. He was right. "Maybe I am. Better you find out now if you can handle my world before it gets more complicated." "It's already complicated," Robert said softly, briefly touching her arm. "And I'm still here." Eastside Public School was an hour and 40-minute commute from the office on Fifth Avenue. Robert insisted on going with his car and driver, but Maria convinced him to take the subway. "If you're going to truly know my life, you need to experience how I really move around the city," she argued. The subway at 7 in the evening was a study in compressed humanity. Exhausted workers heading home, students with headphones, street vendors offering candies and pens. Robert was clearly uncomfortable at first, squeezed between sweaty bodies, holding onto the handrail as the car shook and rattled along the tracks. "Do you do this every day?" he asked, trying not to sound judgmental. "Not every day. Sometimes I take the bus, depending on where I need to go. Sometimes Uber when I'm running late and can afford it." Maria looked around the subway car with familiarity. "New York is like this for most people. No helicopters crossing the sky in 5 minutes. It's just sweat, waiting, exhaustion." Robert remained quiet, absorbing it all. He knew this intellectually, numbers, statistics, reports on public transport. But abstract knowledge was different from being there, feeling it in his skin. The school was a 3-story building painted in faded yellow, with bars on the windows, graffiti on the outside walls that someone had tried to cover, with paint, but were still visible. The courtyard was decorated with paper streamers for the science fair, and makeshift tables displayed student projects, baking soda volcanoes, electric circuits made with potatoes, models of the solar system. Sarah and Ethan were at a table in the corner, a hand-painted banner behind them. Water filtration, sustainable solutions for low-income communities. The project consisted of a filtration system made with PET bottles, sand, activated charcoal and stones, demonstrating how dirty water could be purified with accessible materials. "Mom!" Sarah waved when she saw them arriving. Then her eyes widened. "Robert, You came. Ethan said you guys worked hard on this. I wouldn't miss it, Robert replied, and Maria noticed how Ethan smiled. A genuine smile from a boy happy to have his dad there. They spent the next hour listening to Sarah and Ethan explain the project to judges, teachers, and other parents. Maria discreetly observed Robert, seeing how he interacted, asking genuine questions to the teenagers, praising their ingenuity, chatting with other parents without a trace of superiority. "Your boyfriend seems very interested," a mum commented to Maria while they waited for the evaluation results. "He's not We're not married," Maria quickly corrected. "Oh, sorry. Boyfriend then, it's great that he supports you. My ex never came to these things." Maria didn't correct her again. Boyfriend. The word sounded strange yet fitting at the same time. Sarah and Ethan won third place. It wasn't first, but they were beaming nonetheless. Ethan hugged his dad, a tight, lingering hug, and Maria saw tears in Robert's eyes that he quickly blinked away. "I'm proud of you," Robert said to his son, his voice hoarse with emotion. "I couldn't have done it without Sarah. She had the whole idea. I just helped with the calculations," Ethan generously admitted. "Teamwork, even more impressive," Robert replied. On the way back, this time Robert called the driver, claiming it was too late for the subway, and Maria didn't argue. The teenagers excitedly chatted in the back seat about the next project they wanted to do. Robert and Maria sat in front, in comfortable silence. "Thank you for letting me be part of this," Robert eventually said. "Thank you for wanting to be part of it." When they arrived at Maria's building, Robert got out of the car too. Sarah and Ethan had already gone upstairs, giving their parents a moment of privacy. "Can I confess something?" Robert said, leaning against the car, hands in his pockets. "You and your confessions," Maria joked, but her heart raced. "Today was one of the best days I've had in years. I didn't close any deals, I didn't make any money, I didn't impress anyone important. I just lived, with real people, doing real things. And it was perfect." Maria stepped a little closer. "Robert, you need to understand something. This is my life. Not occasionally, but always. Crowded subway, public school, tight budgets. No glamour. If you're here out of anthropological curiosity or because this seems exotic compared to your world, please tell me now." "It's not curiosity," he said firmly, taking her hands. You make me feel human again, Maria. For the last 20 years, I've turned into an efficient money-making machine. I forgot how to live. You're teaching me again." "I'm not your redemption project." "I know. And that's not what you are. You are the most real person I've ever met, and I'm falling for you." The words hung in the air between them. Maria felt tears prick her eyes. "That scares me," she admitted, "because I'm falling for you too. And I have so much to lose if it goes wrong." "I have a lot to lose too. Ethan is finally happy, finally opening up. If I mess this up, then we won't mess it up," Maria said. "Simple as that. We try for real. No games, no hiding things. Brutal honesty even when it hurts." "Brutal honesty," Robert agreed. "Starting now, there's something I need to tell you." Maria's stomach tightened. "What?" "My mom wants to meet you." Maria blinked, confused. "Your mom?" "Helen Anderson, founder of the company. My technical boss, even though I'm the CEO. The woman who makes grown investors cry in meetings. She's heard about you, and about us, and wants to have dinner. Is that good or bad? Honestly, I don't know," Robert admitted. "My mum is complicated, brilliant, relentless, and has very strong opinions about who should or shouldn't be in the family's life." "And do you think she'll approve of me?" Maria asked, already knowing the answer. "I think she'll test you, a lot, and if you pass, she'll respect you. If you don't—" He left the sentence, unfinished. "When?" "Next week. Friday, dinner at her house in Central Park." Maria took a deep breath. Okay, I can handle intimidating matriarchs. I've dealt with worse clients. Robert smiled, but there was worry in his eyes. You don't know my mom. The next night, Maria was working late in the studio when the phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Miss Thompson? My name is Helen Anderson, Robert's mom. The voice was clear, articulate, with that polished New York accent of the old elite. Maria sat up straighter automatically. Miss Anderson, it's a pleasure. I imagine Robert mentioned our dinner on Friday. He did. Great. I would like to advance that I appreciate punctuality, honesty, and intelligent conversations. I do not appreciate flattery, falseness, or people who waste my time. Maria felt a spark of irritation ignite. Good to know. I also appreciate honesty. So I'll be direct. Why are you calling me before dinner? Silence on the line. Then, surprisingly, a low laugh. Interesting. Robert said you had backbone. Well, Miss Thompson, I'm calling because I care to know who my son is involved with, especially when that person is also professionally connected to the family business. Do you understand my concern? Perfectly. If I were in your position, I would do the same. Did you do any research on me? I did. You founded the company in 1987 with an initial capital of $50,000. It grew to manage $12 billion in assets. Forbes ranked you as one of the most powerful women in the US 3 times. Respected, feared, known for firing executives who tried to deceive you. Homework done. Impressive. And what else did you find out? That you've been a widow for 15 years. That you raised Robert practically alone after your husband died of cancer, that you have a reputation for being impossible to impress and impossible to deceive. All true. So tell me, Ms. Thompson, why should I believe that your intentions with my son are genuine and not financial? And there it was. The question Maria knew would eventually come, because if I wanted money, I would have accepted when Robert offered to pay my debts on our second date. I would have let him pay for dinner at the Ritz. I would have acted like all the other women who probably circle around him. I didn't accept anything other than fair payment for qualified work, and I continue living in the same rented apartment in Greenwich Village, still taking the subway, still paying my own bills. But you accepted the office project, an $8 million project. I accepted because I'm good at what I do and because Robert needed someone to challenge him, not someone who just agrees with everything. If you review my work, and I imagine you already have, you'll see that I'm not overcharging. I'm not recommending suppliers who give me a commission. I'm not taking advantage. I'm doing my job. Another silence. Maria could almost hear Helen thinking, evaluating, deciding. Friday, 8 p.m. Don't be late, Ms. Thompson. I won't, Ms. Anderson. The call ended. Maria placed the phone on the table, her hands trembling slightly. Sarah appeared from the kitchen with 2 glasses of juice. Was it him? It was his mother. Oh, crap. This is serious, then. Very serious, Maria agreed, taking the juice and drinking it in a long gulp. You're scared. Terrified, Maria admitted. This woman built an empire, Sarah. She eats people for breakfast, and I'm going to sit at her table and be judged. Then show her who you really are, Sarah said with conviction. You're the woman who raised a daughter alone, paid debts that weren't yours, built a business from scratch. You're no less than her just because you have fewer zeros in your bank account. Maria pulled her daughter into a hug. When did you grow up so much? I've always been grown. You're just noticing now. That night, Maria lay awake, thinking about what she would wear, what she would say, how she would behave. And for the first time since she started getting involved with Robert, she allowed herself to question whether she was ready to enter that world, a world of family dynasties, relentless expectations, and constant judgments. But then she thought about how Robert looked at her, how he held her hand on the subway, how he cried when Ethan hugged him at the science fair. And she decided that no matter how scary it was worth a try. Helen Anderson's mansion was located on one of the most exclusive streets in Central Park, hidden behind tall, ivy-covered walls and a wrought-iron gate that probably cost more than the entire car Maria had sold years ago. The intercom had a high-definition camera, and when Maria announced herself, the gate slid open silently, revealing an impeccably maintained garden leading to a 3-story modernist house, all glass and exposed concrete, strategically lit so that it seemed to float in the darkness. Maria had spent 2 hours getting ready, changing outfits 5 times until she finally settled on a simple black dress. The same one from her first date with Robert, because it was the only one that made her feel both elegant and herself. Sarah had supervised her hair, insisting on a sophisticated low bun, and had lent her the only pair of pearl earrings they owned, a family heirloom. "You look beautiful, Mom," Sarah had said before she left, "and remember, you're no less than anyone there." Now, standing in front of the heavy dark wood door, Maria repeated those words like a mantra. She took a deep breath and rang the bell. A uniformed maid opened the door, perfect professional smile. "Ms. Thompson, please come in. Miss Helen is waiting for you in the living room." The interior was exactly what Maria would expect. Expensive minimalism, each piece of furniture a design piece, out on the walls that was probably worth more than her entire studio. Her footsteps echoed on the marble floor as she followed the maid down a wide hallway. The living room had a double-height ceiling, a whole wall of glass overlooking the illuminated pool in the garden, and white furniture arranged geometrically. Helen Anderson was sitting in a designer armchair, a glass of white wine in hand, wearing a beige tailored suit that silently screamed luxury. She was in her 70s, with grey hair cut into a flawless short bob, an upright posture of someone who never allowed herself to be careless. Her eyes, the same brown eyes that Robert and Ethan inherited, assessed Maria from head to toe in 3 precise seconds. "Punctual," Helen observed, discreetly glancing at the luxury watch on her wrist. "I appreciate that. Have a seat." It wasn't an invitation. It was an order. Maria sat on the indicated sofa, keeping her posture upright, her hands in her lap. The maid brought white wine for her too, without asking preferences, just placed the glass on the coffee table and quietly withdrew. "Robert is late," Helen said, as if that explained everything. "The meeting ran long. He should arrive in 20 minutes. I thought it would be productive for us to talk one-on-one first." "Of course," Maria replied, keeping her voice steady even as her stomach churned. Helen took a slow sip of wine, deliberately savoring it, making Maria wait. It was a strategy Maria recognized, establishing who controlled the pace of the conversation. "So," Helen finally began, "you're the architect who convinced my son to spend $8 million renovating a perfectly functional office." "Functional and oppressive are different things," Maria replied calmly. "The office worked. The people didn't." "And you think bricks and paint will change that?" "No, but a space that respects people's humanity is the beginning. You can't build a healthy culture in a sick environment." Helen tilted her head slightly, her eyes still assessing. "Interesting philosophy for someone who works from home." There it was, the first jab. Maria recognized it was a test to see if she would defend herself or back down. "I work from home because it's pragmatic," Maria said without flinching. "I pay rent for an apartment, not for commercial office space. This allows me to charge less to clients, offer flexibility, and still maintain quality. It's strategy, not limitation." "Or it's a limitation you've turned into a narrative," Helen shot back. Every limitation is an opportunity if you choose to see it that way, Maria replied. I imagine you know that. You started your company in 1987 during a financial dictatorship, a woman in a male-dominated market. The limitations you faced were not small. Helen's eyes sparkled. Genuine interest, perhaps even respect. You did your homework. I always do, especially when I know I'll be tested. And do you think you're being tested now? I know I am. The question is, am I passing? Helen almost smiled. Almost. You're direct. I like that. Most people who sit here flatter me, agreeing with everything I say, waiting for approval. I don't need your approval, Maria said, letting the words breathe before continuing. It would obviously be easier if you liked me. It would be more comfortable. But I'm not here for comfort. I'm here because your son matters to me. And if you can't accept that, I will survive. He will survive. We will find a way. Even if that means distancing him from the family. Even so. Helen placed her wineglass on the table with calculated precision. Robert told me about your ex-husband, the doubts he left behind. Are you still paying? I am. 40,000 still. But the office project will allow me to pay it off. And then? What's the next step in your plan? Keep working, build my portfolio, maybe eventually hire an assistant, expand a bit. Nothing grand. No ambition for growth? No plans for empire building? My ambition is to create spaces that improve people's lives and earn enough to give my daughter a decent education and the stability I never had. That's empire. Enough for me. Helen stood up, walked to the glass wall, gazing at the illuminated pool. Maria remained seated, knowing that any movement would be interpreted as nervousness. Do you know what I see when I look at you? Helen asked without turning around. No. I see someone who could easily take advantage of my son. He's vulnerable right now, emotionally. After what happened with Ethan, he's different, more open, more susceptible. Susceptible to what? Happiness? Genuine human connection? Maria felt anger rising but kept her voice steady. With all due respect, Mrs. Anderson, your son is not a helpless victim. He's an adult man, intelligent, capable of making his own decisions. He's my son, Helen said, turning abruptly. And a mother protects her children, no matter their age. I'm a mother too, Maria replied, standing now, facing Helen. So I understand the instinct, but protecting and controlling are different things. You can build walls so high around him that no one can get in, including happiness. And you think that's his happiness? I don't know. We're still figuring it out, but I know that when we're together, he smiles more, he relaxes. He remembers how to be human beyond being a CEO. If that's not the beginning of happiness, I don't know what is. They stood there, two women separated by decades of experience and miles of socio-economic reality, but connected by something fundamental, protective love for their own. The sound of the front door opening broke the moment. Robert rushed in, loosened tie, worried expression. Sorry for the delay, the meeting. He stopped, looking from one to the other, sensing the tension in the air. Is everything okay here? Perfectly fine, Helen said, returning to her armchair and picking up the wine as if nothing had happened. Maria and I were having a productive conversation about architecture and ambition. Robert looked at Maria, a silent question in his eyes. She nodded briefly. I'm fine. Dinner was served in the formal dining room, a solid wood table that could easily seat 20, but there were only 3 of them, sitting at one end. The food was exceptional. Scallop appetizer, lamb in red wine sauce for the main course, passion fruit mousse for dessert. All served by a silent maid who came and went like a ghost. The conversation during dinner was lighter, Helen asked, about the progress of the project. Robert explained organizational changes he was implementing. Maria shared some funny stories about difficult clients. But there was an undercurrent of tension that never completely disappeared. Ethan mentioned he's really enjoying the new school, Helen commented at one point. He is, Robert confirmed. The therapist said it's the best she's seen him in years. And the girl, Sarah, have you met her? I have. Several times, actually. They had dinner at home last week. Robert looked at Maria affectionately. Sarah is brilliant, smart, mature for her age, kind. She has a good heart, Maria said softly. She's been through a lot, but she hasn't let it make her bitter. Admirable, Helen said, and it seemed genuine. Raising a child alone while working and paying debts, it can't be easy. It's not. But you also raised Robert practically alone after your husband passed away. I imagine you understand. Helen paused, fork in hand, in the air, looking at Maria with an expression that was impossible to decipher. Yes, I understand. After dinner, Helen accompanied them to the door. Robert went out first to get the car, leaving the two women alone for a moment in the entrance hall. Ms. Thompson, Helen said, her voice softer than it had been all night. May I give you some advice? Of course. My son is a good man, but he was raised in a world that teaches that money solves everything. He will try to fix your problems, pay your bills, help in ways that you might interpret as intrusive or disrespectful. Don't let that destroy what you have. Maria nodded slowly. And what if he can't learn to stop? Then teach him, firmly. That's what I would have done. Helen paused, then added in an even lower voice, You are the first woman he has brought here since Ethan's mother, and you are the first who hasn't bored me in 5 minutes. That means something. Is that approval? Maria asked directly. It's recognition, Helen corrected. Approval you will have to earn over time. But you have backbone, intelligence, and you genuinely seem to care about my son beyond what he can buy. That's a start. Robert's car appeared at the entrance. Helen extended her hand. A formal but respectful gesture. Maria shook it. Good night, Miss Anderson. Good night, Maria. And please call me Helen. Miss Anderson makes me feel older than I already am. In the car, Robert immediately asked, What happened before I got here? You two looked ready to duel. We were just getting to know each other, Maria said diplomatically. Your mom is exactly as you described. Intimidating, brilliant, relentless. And I think she doesn't hate me. Yet. That's progress. Robert took her hand, kissing it gently. You are amazing. Do you know that? I'm starting to believe it. They drove in comfortable silence for a few blocks until Robert asked, Did she say anything that worried you? Maria thought about Helen's warning, about Robert trying to solve problems with money. She warned me that you would try to help me financially and that I shouldn't let that destroy what we have. Robert sighed. She knows me well. So she was right? You will try. Probably, he admitted honestly. It's how I've been programmed, Maria. I see a problem, I want to solve it, and money has always been my main tool. But I'm not a problem to be solved. I know. Intellectually, I know. But in practice, he paused, searching for words. It's hard to see someone you love struggling when you have the resources to make it easier. Love? Maria repeated softly. It was the first time the word had been said so clearly between them. Robert stopped the car. They were 2 blocks from her apartment. He turned to face her completely. Yes, love. I love you, Maria. I love your strength, your integrity, the way you fight for everything you have. I love how you are as a mother, a professional, a person. And I know it's early. I know it's scary, but it's true. Tears burned in Maria's eyes. I love you too. And you're right, it's scary. Because I have so much to lose. We both do. But it's worth the risk, isn't it? Maria thought of Sarah, always encouraging. She thought of Ethan, genuinely smiling for the first time in months. She thought of the office's work, transforming not just space, but culture. She thought of all the little ways she and Robert had intertwined over the past weeks. It is, she agreed, but with rules. Rules? No trying to pay my debts without asking. No extravagant gifts that I can't reciprocate. No treating me like a charity project. We are equal partners, Robert. Even when our bank accounts say otherwise. Equal partners, he repeated. I can live with that. Can you? I'll have to learn, because losing you would be worse than any discomfort of adjusting expectations. They kissed there, in the car parked on the quiet street of Greenwich Village, a kiss that sealed promises and acknowledged fears. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. Want to come up? Maria offered. Sarah is probably awake, waiting for a full interrogation about how dinner went. I would love to, but only if she promises not to ask me too many embarrassing questions. She's 14. Embarrassing questions are her specialty. When they entered the apartment, Sarah was indeed awake, pretending to study but obviously waiting. She looked from one to the other, saw their intertwined hands and smiled. So? Did you survive the matriarch? I survived. I think, Maria replied. She's intimidating but fair, Robert added. Like your mom, actually. They seem much more alike than they would like to admit, Maria murmured, and Robert laughed because it was true. They stayed up late, the three of them talking about school, projects, future plans. At some point, Ethan messaged and ended up on a video call, joining the conversation, even from afar. And Maria realized something fundamental. This was no longer just her and Robert trying to figure out a relationship. It was four people starting to become something like family. They were still early. They were still complicated. But for the first time, Maria allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this could really work. If you or someone you know is going through a difficult time, there is free support available. 3 months later, the office was almost ready. Glass walls had replaced the opaque dividers, natural light flooded every floor, and strategically placed live plants brought life to what had once been a corporate mausoleum. Maria was on the 29th floor, overseeing the final installation of the modular furniture, when her phone rang. It was an unknown number, but local. Hello? Maria Thompson? The voice was female, young, nervous. Yes, who is this? My name is Julia Santos. I'm a journalist from the Times. I'm doing a piece on real estate projects in the South Side and, well, your name came up in some documents we obtained. Maria's stomach tightened. What kind of documents? Social impact reports from a 2019 project, a residential development in the South Side that resulted in the demolition of the Palmares Cultural Center. The company responsible for the funding was Mariana Thompson Investments, and we found out that you are involved with the CEO of the company. Maria sat heavily in a newly installed chair. Palmares Cultural Center. She recognized that name. Her mom used to take Sarah there during school breaks before she passed away. Art workshops, capoeira classes, community library. It had been demolished 3 years ago to make way for a luxury condominium. I didn't know, she said, her voice coming out tense. I didn't know about that project. But you are romantically involved with Robert Anderson and doing $1 million project for his company. Can you understand how that looks? Convenient. Convenient how exactly? Maria felt anger rising. As if it were a form of compensation or silencing. The company destroyed an important community space and then hires someone from the affected community for a big project. Good for public relations. That's absurd. The project from your firm has nothing to do with... But it has everything to do with optics, doesn't it? A humble architect, single mum, renovating the office of the billionaire who destroyed a cultural center that your own family used to visit. It's an interesting narrative. Maria hung up, her hands trembling. She tried to process what she had just heard. Palmares Cultural Center. Did Robert's company fund that? She tried to remember. 2019, she and Sarah were still recovering from the loss of Richard, barely making rent. When the center closed, Sarah cried for days. It was the last place where she had memories of her grandmother. She dialed Robert immediately. "Maria, are you okay?" "I need you to be completely honest with me right now. Palmares Cultural Center. Southside, 2019. Did your company fund the demolition?" Silence on the line. Silence that lasted a long time. "Robert, answer." "Yes," he finally said, his voice heavy. "But Maria, I didn't have direct knowledge. It was one of the hundreds of projects our managers approved. I never—" "You never what? Never stopped to think about the consequences? Never questioned what was being demolished?" "At the time, no. It was just another development with a projected 18% return. Numbers on a spreadsheet." "Numbers," Maria repeated, feeling nauseous. "My mom took Sarah to that center. She learned percussion there, participated. In reading circles, had friends. When it closed, Sarah was devastated, and you funded that." "Maria, please let me explain in person. A journalist just called me. An article is coming out suggesting that our relationship is a public relations strategy, that you hired me to soften the negative impact of decisions that destroyed communities." "That's ridiculous. You know that's not true." "Do I? Because now I'm questioning everything. That casual meeting at the restaurant, was it really a coincidence? Did you research me beforehand? Did you know about my connection to the cultural center?" "No. Maria, you are being irrational." "Don't call me irrational," she shouted, causing workers to stop and look. She stepped into the hallway, lowering her voice. "You destroyed something important to my family, Robert, and here I am, decorating your office, as if none of this mattered." "It was 3 years ago. I've changed since then. You know I've changed." "Changed after what? After your son attempted suicide? Is it only personal tragedy that makes you see the consequences of your actions, and all the other tragedies you caused before that?" "Maria, please. I need time. Don't call me." She hung up before he could respond. That night, Maria sat with Sarah in the small living room of the apartment. She laid everything out on the table: the journalist's call, the Palmares Cultural Center, the connection to Robert's company. Sarah was silent for a long time, processing. When she finally spoke, her voice was cold, in a way Maria had never heard. "He did this? His company destroyed Grandma's center? It was one of the companies they funded. Robert says he had no direct knowledge. But he's the CEO, Mom. How does he not know what his company is doing?" "Because there are managers, entire departments that make those decisions. That's the excuse?" Sarah stood up, pacing back and forth, "that he was too busy counting money to care about what he was destroying?" "Sarah, do you know what that place meant to me? To Grandma. It was the only place where I felt connected. After Dad left, after Grandma died, that center was like, it was proof that there were still good people doing good things, and they demolished it to build a building that no one from the neighborhood can afford." Maria felt tears rolling down. "I know, sweetheart. I know. And now you're dating the man responsible? How, Mom? How can you?" "Because I didn't know. If I had known." "What would you have done? Rejected the $8 million project? Broken up with him? Or would you have found a way to justify why the money is too good?" The words cut like knives. "Sarah, that's not fair." "Fair? You want to talk about fair? Do you think it was fair to destroy the center? Do you think it's fair now that you're working for those people?" "They're not those people. Robert is a billionaire who destroys communities for profit, Ethan is nice, sure, but his dad, he is exactly the kind of person we always criticized, and you're in love with him. Sarah grabbed her backpack. I'm going to sleep at Beatrice's. Sarah, wait. I need space, Mum. I need to think. The door slammed and Maria was left alone in the silent apartment, surrounded by the project papers that now felt stained, dirty with implications she hadn't seen before. Her phone vibrated. Message from Robert. Please let me explain. In person, you deserve the whole truth. She didn't respond. 2 days later, Maria finally agreed to meet Robert. Not at the office, not at his house, but at Central Park, neutral ground where they could talk without walls closing in around them. He was waiting by the lake, wearing the same casual clothes he had on during their first meeting. He wore jeans and a simple shirt, as if he wanted to shed all corporate layers. He had deep dark circles under his eyes and stubble. He looked like he had aged years in just days. Thank you for coming, he said as she approached. Maria kept her physical distance. Explain everything. Robert took a deep breath. In 2019, one of our portfolio managers approved funding for the South Garden residential project. It was a standard investment. Return analysis, risk assessment, profit projection. The report that landed on my desk was 3 pages long, focused on numbers. It didn't mention demolitions, community impact, none of that. And you signed without questioning? Yes. Just as I signed another 200 proposals that year. Maria, I was operating on a scale that made it impossible to know the details of every project. I delegated trust to the managers. Blind trust. Yes, he admitted, blind trust. And that's my fault. I can't claim ignorance as an excuse. In the end, my name is on the company, my responsibility. They walked slowly around the lake, silent for a few minutes. Sarah is devastated, Maria finally said. She feels betrayed. By me, by you, by the whole situation. Ethan is also confused. He asked if I knew if I hid this on purpose. I had to admit I didn't even remember the project until you mentioned it. And isn't that worse? That you didn't even remember? That destroying a place important to hundreds of people was so insignificant that it didn't stay in your memory? Robert stopped, staring at her. Yes, it's worse, much worse. And I have no excuse, Maria. I can give you reasons. Shareholder pressure, profit maximization culture, systemic detachment between financial decisions and human consequences. But in the end, they are just explanations, not justifications. The journalist is going to publish the article. She will suggest that our relationship is calculated. I know. My lawyers informed me. They want to sue for defamation, but I said no. Maria looked at him surprised. Why? Because it's not defamation if it has factual basis. My company destroyed that center. You are working for me. We are involved. Those are facts. People can draw whatever conclusions they want. Suing will only look like an attempt to silence. So what are you going to do? I've already done something, Robert said. I called an extraordinary board meeting. I proposed creating a community repair fund. $50 million allocated to rebuild and finance cultural spaces in areas affected by our past developments, including a new Palmares Cultural Center. Maria stopped walking. 50 million? It's real company money, not personal philanthropy. It comes from the operations fund. It will impact our quarterly balance. Shareholders will complain. Some partners have already threatened to contest, but it's the least I can do. Robert, do you realize this will cost you your position? My mom already warned me. She said I'm putting personal interests above business, that I'm showing weakness. 3 minority shareholders have already initiated a process to contest the decision. And yet you did it? Because it was right, because you showed me that I built an empire on a foundation of indifference. And because if I'm going to try to be your partner, genuine partner, I need to have values that you can respect. Tears burned in Maria's eyes. That doesn't erase what was done. I know, it will never erase. The original center is destroyed. The memories that Sarah had of that specific place are lost. But maybe we can build something new, something better, with the community's voice from the start, not top-down decisions. Sarah won't forgive me easily. She thinks I betrayed our principles. Ethan said something similar, that I embarrassed him, that he doesn't know if he can trust me. Robert ran a hand through his hair, exhausted. But he also said that at least now I'm trying to do the right thing. That counts for something. Maria thought of Sarah, her justified anger, how the world seemed simpler at 14, good and evil clearly defined, without uncomfortable grey areas. I don't know if I can go on with this, she finally said, the words coming out painfully. Not because of you, but because of her. Sarah needs to know that her feelings matter more than any relationship of mine. I understand, Robert said, and there was genuine acceptance in his voice. You are a mom first, always. It's one of the things I love most about you. But I also think we can turn this crisis into an opportunity. Sarah is angry because she cares, because that place meant something. What if she could be part of the reconstruction? What if we gave a voice to the youth of the community in creating the new center? Wouldn't that be more powerful than just demolishing or rebuilding? Maria considered. Are you suggesting involving teenagers in the design process? I'm suggesting that the new Palmares Cultural Center be designed and managed by the community, including youth, and if Sarah wants to participate, it would be an honor to have her. Not as a favor, but because she has a perspective that no professional architect has. It was a bold idea, possibly brilliant, or possibly disastrous. I need to talk to her, Maria said. No promises, but I'll present the idea. That's all I ask. They stood facing each other, the lake behind reflecting the cloudy sky of New York. I love you, Robert said. That hasn't changed, but I understand if you can't continue. Sarah comes first, always. I love you too, Maria admitted, and that makes everything more complicated. It would be easier if I didn't love. Rarely are the things worth having easy. Maria nodded, knowing he was right, but hating how difficult it was. That night she sat with Sarah again. She explained Robert's proposal, the repair fund, the reconstruction of the center, the possibility of community involvement. Sarah listened in silence, then said, Is he doing this out of guilt or because you asked? I think both, and also because Ethan challenged him, and because he's finally understanding the consequences of his actions. That's not enough. I know, but it's a start. Sarah was quiet for a long time, fiddling with her nails, thinking. If I participate in this, she finally said, it's not because I forgave him. It's because that center deserves to exist again, for all the kids who need it like I needed it. I understand. And you, Mom, are you going to stay with him? Maria hesitated. I don't know yet. I need to process everything, but I want you to know. Your opinions matter. If you really can't stand this, I'll end it. Sarah looked at her mother, really looked, seeing beyond the immediate situation to something greater. You truly love him, don't you? I do. And does he make you happy? Genuinely happy? He does, most of the time. Then don't end it because of me, Sarah said. End it if you think you should, but don't use me as an excuse. I don't want to carry that weight. Maria hugged her daughter, feeling immense pride. When had she become so wise? When did you grow up so much? She murmured. I've always been grown up, Mom. You're just finally noticing. and for the first time in days they both smiled. 6 months later, on a sunny Saturday morning, Maria was on the lot where the old Palmares Cultural Center had existed. The space was transformed, the old demolition now replaced by new foundations, structures beginning to rise, plans scattered indicating where each part of the new center would be. But there was a fundamental difference this time. The walls yet to be built already carried something the previous design never had: soul. Sarah was at the center of a group of community teenagers, all wearing orange safety vests, holding clipboards and discussing animatedly. She led the meeting with a confidence that Maria barely recognized in her shy daughter from months ago. "The library needs natural light," Sarah explained, pointing to the drawings. "But it also needs cozy corners where people can read without feeling exposed. So we thought about tall windows with shelves underneath, creating nooks." Ethan was beside her, showing 3D renderings he had created on the computer. "And look, we managed to include solar panels on the roof. The center will generate its own energy, truly sustainable, not just talk." Maria watched from afar, pride tightening her chest. In recent months, Sarah had transformed. The initial anger had channeled into purpose. She had dived into the center project with fierce intensity, recruiting other young people from the area, organizing community meetings, ensuring every voice was heard. It was no longer just about rebuilding a building. It was about reclaiming space, identity, and future. Robert approached from behind, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. He handed one to Maria. "They're amazing," he said softly, watching the teenagers work. "They are. Sarah found something she didn't know she was looking for." "Ethan, too. He told me yesterday he wants to study sustainable architecture. Not business, not finance. Architecture." Maria looked at Robert, surprised. "And you?" "I'm proud. Scared because it means he probably won't take over the company, but proud." Robert took a sip of coffee. "My mom almost had a fit when I told her." "I can imagine." They fell into comfortable silence, watching. The work from Anderson Investments had been completed 2 weeks ago, on time, within budget, and already showing results. Employee turnover had dropped 62%, requests for medical leave due to stress had decreased, and, surprisingly, productivity had increased. But the personal cost for Robert had been high. 3 minority partners had sued the company, contesting the Community Repair Fund. Helen had threatened to remove him from the CEO position. The financial press had portrayed him as sentimental, weak, allowing personal emotions to influence business decisions. "Do you regret it?" Maria suddenly asked. "The fund, the center, everything?" "Anything." Robert thought seriously. "No. I lost some partners, but I gained respect from employees. My personal fortune has decreased significantly, but Ethan looks me in the eye again, and you're still here, despite having 1,000 reasons to leave. So no, I don't regret it." "Your mom is still trying to make me give up on you," Maria commented with a half-smile. "Is she?" "Called last week. Said I was distracting you from fiduciary responsibilities and that companies aren't run with heart." "What did you say?" "I said companies run without heart eventually implode from internal rot, even when the numbers look good." She hung up on me. Robert laughed, that genuine laugh that Maria had learned to love. "She'll respect you eventually, just needs time, or she'll tolerate me because she has no choice." "That works too," Sarah shouted from across the lot. "Mom, come see this!" Maria and Robert walked over to where the teenagers were gathered. Sarah was pointing at a large map spread out on the makeshift ground. "We had an idea. How about making a memory wall? Where people can bring photos, stories, objects from the old center, like a memorial but alive, always changing as new memories are added. Like a community museum within the cultural center," Ethan added excitedly. Maria knelt down to see the design better. It was a beautiful concept, a large wall in the entrance hall with panels that could be updated, space for photos, texts, even small objects in display cases. "It's perfect," she said. "It honors the past while building the future." "Grandma would be proud," Sarah said softly, and there were tears in her eyes, but also a smile. Robert watched. The scene, Maria kneeling on the construction site, surrounded by teenagers passionately discussing design and community, all covered in dust but radiant with purpose. And he realized something fundamental. He hadn't lost anything in the past months. He had regained humanity. 3 months later, the article from the Times finally came out. Journalist Julia Smith had spent months researching, interviewing, fact-checking. The headline was not what Maria had feared. "Billionaire and architect. From controversial romance to community reconstruction, how personal crisis sparked systemic change." The article was extensive, detailed, and surprisingly balanced. Yes, it mentioned the demolition of the original center and the role of Anderson Investments. Yes, it initially questioned Robert's motivations, but it also extensively documented the process of the last. Months passed. Community meetings, youth involvement, financial transparency of the repair fund, and already visible results. There was even a section of interviews with local residents. "At first, we thought it was just a scam," said Mary Grace, 67, a resident of the South Side for 40 years. "Rich people trying to clear their conscience. But they came here, sat with us, really listened, and they are doing what they promised. That's rare." "The old center was important, and it's sad that we lost it," commented John Charles, a martial arts instructor who worked at the original center. "But this new one, it's going to be better, because this time we decided how it would be." The article also didn't hold back criticisms. "It's still problematic that the destruction happened in the first place," notes Dr. Paul Smith, a sociologist specializing in urban studies. "Repair is necessary, but it doesn't replace prevention. Ideally, companies should consider community impact before approving demolitions, not after." When Mary finished reading, Robert was sitting next to her in his living room. Both, in silence. "It could be worse," he finally said. "It could be much worse. She was fair, critical but fair. My mom is going to hate it, especially the part where you say I was emotionally disconnected before. You were, I know. But Helen is going to interpret that as weakness. Then let her. Robert, you can't spend your whole life trying to prove strength to your mom. Eventually, you need to decide what strength means to you." Robert took her hand, gently kissing the knuckles. "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been. You were just too busy noticing." They laughed, and the tension broke. The official launch of the new Palmares Cultural Center was scheduled for a Saturday in December, the day before Christmas. The entire community came, hundreds of people, children running among the adults, the smell of popcorn and cotton candy from street vendors, the sound of drums from a local percussion group warming up. The building was ready. 3 stories of glass and brick in sight, solar panels shining on the roof, a vertical garden growing on the front facade, the famous memory wall already beginning to fill with photos and stories. Inside, there was a library with 5,000 new books, equipped workshop rooms, a dance studio with appropriate flooring, a community kitchen, and even a small theater with a capacity for 80 people. Sarah and Ethan had coordinated the opening ceremony. No long speeches from authorities, but performances by community children. Dance, music, poetry. Mary watched from the audience, tears rolling freely. When it finally came her turn to speak, because the community insisted, Mary stepped up to the small makeshift stage, nervous. She was not a public speaker, but she looked out at the crowd of faces, some familiar, many not, all waiting. "I'm not good with words," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm better with floor plans and paint samples, but there's something I need to say." She took a deep breath. "This place, the original center, was important to my family. My mom brought my daughter here. When we lost it, we lost part of our history. And when I found out I was involved with someone whose company destroyed this place, I was devastated too." She saw Robert in the audience, Ethan beside him, both attentive. "But I learned something in these months. I learned that past mistakes don't define the future if you choose to do differently. That genuine repair isn't about money, though money helps, but about listening, about relinquishing control, about trusting that people know what they need better than any expert." She gestured to the building behind her. "This place isn't mine. It's not Robert's. It's not even Sarah's or Ethan's, though they worked incredibly hard. It belongs to you, to the community, and I hope it becomes what you need it to be." The applause was thunderous. Mary stepped down from the stage, her legs trembling, and was immediately embraced by Sarah. "You were amazing, Mom. I was dying of nerves." "You didn't seem like it." Robert approached but kept a respectful distance. In recent months, he had learned to read situations, when Mary wanted closeness and when she needed space. "Thank you," she said to him, "for really doing this. Thank you for teaching me how." Helen Anderson unexpectedly appeared among the crowd, elegant even at a community event, wearing beige linen and Prada sunglasses. She observed the building, the crowd, the vibrant energy of the place. "Well," she said, approaching Robert and Mary, "this isn't financially sensible investment. The return will be minimal if there is one." "Mom," Robert began, a warning tone. "But," Helen continued, ignoring the interruption, "it's the first thing you've done in years that has soul, so maybe the return isn't just measured in dollars." It was a compliment in Helen's twisted way. Mary understood that. "Thank you, Helen." "Don't thank me yet. I still think you're a dangerous influence on my son. But," she paused, choosing her words, "maybe dangerous in a necessary way. Uncomfortable but transformative." Robert looked from his mum to Mary, surprised. Was that almost a compliment? "Don't get used to it," Helen retorted, but there was a ghost of a smile on her lips. That night, after most people had left, Mary and Robert walked through the streets of the South Side. Sarah and Ethan had gone home with the driver, leaving the parents with a moment of privacy. "It was a good day," Robert said. It was. Exhausting, but good. They reached a small square with worn wooden benches. They sat down, the distant noise of the city around them, the darkened sky of New York never really dark because of light pollution. "Mary," Robert began, turning to face her, "these last months have been the hardest and most important of my life. I lost partners, faced lawsuits, fought with my mum countless times, but I gained something much more valuable." "What?" "Purpose, and you." He took her hand. "I know it's still complicated. I know we come from different worlds and that there will continue to be moments where our realities collide, but I want to keep trying. I want to build a life with you, for real, not just stolen moments between work and responsibilities." Maria felt her heart race. "Robert, what are you saying?" "I'm saying I want you and Sarah to move closer, not to my house. I know you wouldn't accept that right now, but there's an apartment in the building next to mine. 3 bedrooms, a perfect studio in the living room already furnished. It's company property. It was vacant. You could consider." "Robert, before you say no, hear me out. It's not charity. It would be market rent you would pay normally. But it would be closer. Sarah and Ethan could see each other more easily, and we—" He paused. vulnerable in a way he rarely was. I wake up every day wanting to see you, wanting to have coffee with you, wanting to fall asleep next to you, and I'm tired of pretending I don't want that." Maria stayed quiet, processing. Part of her, the cautious, protective part, screamed to refuse. But there was another part, increasingly larger, that wanted to say yes. That was tired of fighting against feelings, against possibilities. "I need to talk to Sarah," she finally said. "I've already talked to her." A voice came from the shadows. Sarah emerged, Ethan by her side, both clearly having followed their parents. "Were you spying on us?" Maria asked, half amused and half shocked. "Obviously," Sarah replied unapologetically, "and I say yes, we should move." "Sarah," "Mom, listen, you're happier when you're with him. I'm happier when Ethan is around. As a friend," she quickly added, blushing slightly. "And honestly, our current apartment has mold in the bathroom and the elevator hasn't worked for 6 months. So yes, let's go." Maria looked at Robert, then at the teenagers, then back at Robert. "Did you orchestrate this with them?" she accused, but without real anger. "Absolutely not," Robert defended himself. "But apparently our kids are master conspirators." "Someone had to give a push," Ethan said with a grin. "You two have been dancing around the subject for months." Maria started to laugh, that deep, free laugh that comes when you realize you've lost control of the situation, but in a good way. Robert joined in, then Sarah and Ethan, until the 4 of them were laughing in the dark square of the south side, united by something improbable and precious. "All right," Maria said when she finally managed to catch her breath. "Let's try. But we keep separate accounts, we keep our own spaces when we need to, and if it starts to get weird or uncomfortable, we stop and reassess." "Agreed," Robert nodded. "And no buying me expensive things randomly just because you can." "I can live with that. And you need to come to the market with me, at least once a week. No sending a driver to do the shopping. I want you to see real prices, real choices." "I can do that." Sarah and Ethan exchanged amused glances as their parents negotiated terms as if it were a business contract. "They're kind of weird," Ethan whispered. "Totally," Sarah agreed, "but it's cute, in a strange and dysfunctional way." 3 months later, on a March morning with surprisingly clear skies for New York, Maria woke up in the new house, the promised apartment, for which she was indeed paying rent, that Sarah had decorated with teenage enthusiasm. She walked to the small balcony and saw the city stretching in all directions. Her phone buzzed. Message from Robert, from the apartment next door. "Coffee at mine or yours?" "Yours, but I'll make it." "Deal." She smiled, putting on her robe, and crossed the hallway. Robert opened the door, still in pajamas, hair messy, glasses askew, looking delightfully human and imperfect. "Good morning," he said, pulling her in for a soft kiss. "Good morning." They made coffee together in his kitchen, a coordinated dance they had developed over the past weeks. She knew where he kept everything. He knew exactly how she liked her coffee. Ethan appeared, stumbling from the kitchen, still half asleep. "Is Sarah coming?" "She'll sleep until noon if we let her," Maria replied. "Typical," Ethan murmured, grabbing juice from the fridge. Robert watched the scene, Maria in her favorite robe, Ethan treating her like a second mom, the ease with which everything fit together. It wasn't perfect. They still had discussions about money, about responsibilities, about how to balance 2 very different worlds. But it was real, and it was theirs. "What are you thinking about?" Maria asked, noticing his distant look. "That a year ago I was in a ridiculously expensive restaurant trying to hide that I was spying on my son, and now I'm here, making coffee in pajamas, perfectly happy." "No regrets?" "None," he said with conviction. "And you?" Maria thought about everything that had changed. The studio that now occupied proper space in the new apartment. The projects she continued to do, not just for Robert, but for new clients that appeared after the newspaper article. Sarah, radiant and engaged, her own quiet but solid happiness. "None," she echoed, and there, in that sunny kitchen in New York, with coffee brewing and promises still being discovered, 4 lives improbably intertwined continued to build something new. Not perfect, but honest, real, and full of possibility.